Hello, this is Alan Morgan with Planet Postmoderna. I want to thank you for watching. I'm the founder of the project and also the author of Children of Arla, which is the current book based on the storyline that is the foundation for this virtual world project. As you can see, we did a lot of testing in various platforms in the very beginning. We did things in VastPark, we did things in Multiverse, which eventually got scrapped because Multiverse stopped providing support. We had started doing some, planet model and character creation, as you can see here, and it was going pretty good, but eventually Multiverse did stop the project, which was really unfortunate, but it was kind of a fun experience. Here's some concept art by various artists, the primary being Vladimir Milosevic, who did a lot of this art. I mean, he was one of the biggest contributors on the project. I mean, I owe him a ton with regards to his contributions. Here's some pictures of the admin buildings, the area looking out from from the canyons, and here's some interesting structures and plants and the pod in the background, some forest scenes, Crystal Canyon, some forest again, some of the charger modules. Here's a farming module. Here's a maintenance module, medical bay. Most of this is just concepts, but then here's the early concept for Temple Quetzalcoatl, which was in Zone 5. Early sketches. The interior of Temple Q. Here's some early concept of the V-chip. One of the creatures, I think this was called the Warser. And an early model of the heavy lifter, which was designed to carry stuff around. Here's an early concept of some natives looking down at base camp. And one of the portals, or the what I call resurrection stones. Early settler concept. The uniform. Some more creatures. Some of the plants that we worked on. Some of these things actually never made it into production, but they were great. Here's a heavy lifter concept by Matt Campbell, who's a talented artist out of Colorado. The Jawa Bata, who's like one of my favorites. The admin building, which we've used many times. And here's some engine testing. Here's some early testing that we did in Vision, which was very similar to CryEngine and Esenthal as far as graphics. Early settler pod pictures. And here's some early terrain testing that we did in CryEngine. I liked CryEngine's graphics. In fact, they're very impressive in a lot of games. But in our case, it was just really hard to work with, mostly from my, for me, because I was doing a lot of the scenery building. Ultimately, I ended up settling on Unity because it was just easier to use. Here's a 3ds Max model of the farming module, interior of one of the admin modules. Here's the pod, which is one of my favorite pictures. I love that model. Here's some scenery and terrain testing. Some day-night cycle testing that we did in Unity. I actually learned that script from a channel on YouTube called Bergzerg Arcade. It automated the day-night cycle, just like you can do in CryEngine. And here's some of the initial planning that we did for Zone 5, which is like the primary section of the demo itself. Kind of shows where everybody started out and ended up at in the first chapter of the game. So they would start in the crater area where base camp is and ultimately end up at Temple Q. Here's a little layout of the pod landing area next to the small little lake next to the base camp area. As you can see, base camp's pretty cluttered with all the different buildings. And then the farming module section shows you kind of an idea of how we had the farming modules laid out. And then engineering camp, which was at the entrance to Crystal Canyon. And then Crystal Canyon here, where John Baxter and many of the characters work their way to the Ota village. And here's an exterior example or concept of Temple Q in the entrance area, where John Baxter and his team ended up. And in the game, there's multiple puzzle rooms and areas that players can actually make their way into. And then eventually they can exit to the Lake of the Serpent Feather or enter the Mayan or Aztec worlds. Now, where are we today? Essentially, I have the book published. So Children of Arla is actually the first in a series of pieces of the story, and book sales go to helping to support the project. I continued to try to learn as much as I could by learning on Unity. I also learned how to do a point-and-click game, which was kind of fun on Udemy, and I actually modeled a point-and-click adventure using their basic concept and added in my cat Ned as the protagonist in the story. He's basically the detective. And it was interesting how the story goes, but I kind of followed along with Udemy and Romi's course as best as I could, and then I just added some more to it, mostly in the storyline and characters. But it taught me a lot on how to do a point and click, and I used his foundation to do like a mini story built upon the original story. And then I did some additional tweaking of the textures, like in the example here of the sign above the nightclub. I also used Cinemachine to change the way the camera settings worked and some of the shots that I was able to do in the game. And it's just an excerpt. I'm not going to go into the whole game. If you want to learn more about the game, the little point-and-click game, you can go check out the sample walkthrough that I have on the website. But it basically ends with Ned finding these lights in the park, and the story ends with him interacting with those lights, and who knows what comes next. But it was a fun experience for me. It allowed me to learn a little bit more about point-and-click adventure games. I'm still deciding whether or not I even want to mess with scripting, because I don't like coding very much. There are a lot of plug-and-play options out there, like Adventure Creator and Game Creator, which is probably what I'm going to end up using to create the storyline and immersion, basically, for the game for Postmoderna's virtual world game. But here, as you can see, Ned goes and interacts with the lights. This just shows you kind of an example of what I was learning since initially working on Planet Postmoderna, because I wasn't able to get the funding that I needed. But I needed to continue learning, of course.